So, Broadchurch episode 2. I'll start off with the Joe Miller trial since that's kind of the main focus of the episode. So at the end of the last episode we saw Danny's body being exhumed for a second autopsy, and we found out just in passing in this episode that there was no new evidence found from that, so it looks like that lead is not going anywhere. Now episode 2 was the first day of the trial, which I did not expect to happen that quickly. We've got what, like another 6 episodes left? 6 or 8, I can't remember how many is in the series. And we're already done with the first day of the trial and we've seen 2 of the witnesses take the stand. So first up was Beth, and she had been briefed before. In fact, Jocelyn, their lawyer, briefed all of the witnesses and basically told them, you know, the most important thing is you have to tell the truth. And had also, you know, warned them that they were going to be asked tricky questions. Despite that though, she's quite clearly thrown by the really personal questions that are being asked for, particularly about her marriage, and she ends up having to admit the affair that Mark had with Becca, the hotel woman, and the kicker being that Danny knew about the affair. She also has to admit that Mark once hit Danny. So you can see that the defence are really focusing on Mark and that is the person they're going to be pushing as the alternative killer of Danny. Throughout the episode as well, you can see that Beth and Mark's relationship is becoming more and more strained. He's still going off and meeting Tom in secret. And yeah, you can kind of see, you know, she's sitting around the dinner table waiting him to arrive home, and it's clear that this is having a real impact on their relationship together, which is not unexpected. You know, this is a lot for them to go through. We also see Alec take the stand, and the main line of questioning for him is around the whole Joe getting beat up by Ellie thing. If you don't remember, in the last series, when Joe is first in custody, Alec lets Ellie into the interview room and she like basically kicks the shit out of him. And earlier in this episode, you actually see Jocelyn berate the both of them for the fact that this happened, because it's quite obvious that she knows that this is going to be something that the defence team are going to focus on a lot. And she's right, because after Alec is questioned about this, the defence actually managed to get the confession disregarded because they claim that he was coerced into doing it. And there's a point where when Alec first heard the confession that there's no other witnesses around, so they're, you know, claiming that he forced this out of him, which seems ridiculous to us, because if you've got, you know, someone that has confessed to something, and obviously this beating up by Ellie took place after he had already confessed. So I don't know in real life how realistic it is that you would then have a confession like that completely disregarded in court. But obviously it's happening in this show, so let's just go with it. And you know, the fact that his confession is thrown out of court is kind of a massive shock for obviously the Latimer family and everyone else in the village in general, and obviously there's going to be massive repercussions now for the rest of the trial, because they're going to have to pin this on Joe without having this confession as evidence. Obviously his DNA is kind of all over the cottage where the murder happened, but you know, there's obviously lots of other explanations as to why he could have been there. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how this now pans out, given that we don't have that confession anymore. So I'm going to go back to a little bit of the Latimer storyline later, but for now let's go on to the Sandbrook story and what happened in this episode. By the end of the first episode, we knew who Claire was and her background with Alec. We also knew that her ex-husband Lee was in Broadchurch and that he was looking for her. Now in episode 2, we see Alec and Lee actually meet face to face. I was also quite surprised that happened so early on, although given what happens later on in the episode, I kind of understand now why they had to have that meeting so early. So Lee basically tells Alec that he wants to see Claire. He also kind of alludes to the fact that Alec is ill, so he says something about it's not good for your health, which kind of implies that it was him that we saw break into Alec's house in the last episode and read the mail, because the letter mentioned about a procedure they had to have. So yeah, Lee basically wants to meet up with Claire. Alec tries to convince Claire to do this and she's definitely not up for it. But then she goes off for chips with Ellie and Ellie manages to convince her that she should meet up with them. They kind of have a little bit of a heart-to-heart about their estranged, possibly murderer husbands, and you know, that sort of bonds them together a little bit. Ellie obviously has like a lot of guilt about Joe and about the fact that he killed Danny and she didn't know that this whole thing was going on, and then Claire, you know, obviously has a bit of guilt about the girls and not knowing where they are and whether or not Lee was involved, and she's clearly kind of using this whole Sandbrook thing to try and, you know, maybe redeem herself a little bit for what's happened. Not like in a selfish way, but in a, you know, she wants to kind of try and make amends somehow, and if she can help to resolve this case and find out what happened to these girls, then it sort of makes up a little bit for, you know, not being able to help Danny. So Claire agrees to meet Lee, and it is decided that the meetup will be in Ellie's old house. So we have this really heartbreaking scene of seeing her go back to the old house and kind of peel back the police tape and walk into the house and see all these pictures of, you know, the happy family that she once had, and she's kind of sitting there having all these flashbacks about happier times, and it's really horrible because you know that, you know, this house and all these memories, you know, that's it, they're never going to have that again, and you know, everything's kind of tainted now based on what's happened. So you really like feel for Ellie in that moment. So Alec's plan is that he has rigged some cameras in the living room, and once Lee and Claire meet there, he's obviously hoping that Lee is going to make a confession. I mean, to me that just seems completely flawed. You know, he really wants to meet Claire, and you imagine it's because he wants to try and get back together with her, or he wants to apologise to her or whatever, but I can't see why he would possibly want to meet up with her and then say, yeah, you know what, I actually did kill those girls. It just seems really far-fetched to me. And I think there's two possibilities here. Either this is, you know, a massive plot hole and we're supposed to just expect that Alec actually genuinely thinks that this is a plan that will work. Or the second one, which I think is most likely, that, you know, he's obviously ill. I mentioned in the last episode about that being in question, you know, is he sick? But I've now remembered that we already know that he has some kind of heart condition from the first series. He's obviously not completely himself, and you can see that I think it's partly to do with his health, and it's also partly to do with, you know, this whole Joe Miller case and the fact that the Sandbrook case still hasn't been solved, and I think it's completely clouding his judgment, and he's, you know, not really thinking straight. So to him, in this kind of unstable mind, yes, this is a perfect plan, it's going to really work. And it kind of looks like it is going to plan at first. You know, Ellie turns up with Claire, they go in the living room, they meet. He kind of checks her to see if she's actually wearing a wire, but she's not. You know, the cameras are actually hidden in the room. If only he just looked at the bookshelf, because that camera looked quite obvious to me. And you've got Ellie at the front door, Alec in the kitchen, both guarding the only two exits from the house. Or are they the only two exits? So things might look like they're going quite smoothly with this meetup, but unfortunately the two storylines, Joe Miller trial and the Sandbrook case, are about to crash head on in the form of Beth Latimer. So Nige spots Ellie turning up at the house, and he then tells Beth that she's back in town. Beth is obviously absolutely raging at the fact that Ellie is back, because in her mind, you know, this is Ellie turning up and trying to act like everything's normal. So she marches round to Ellie's house and has like a big argument with her in the street, and this kind of pushes Ellie gradually further and further away from her house, and it's making a lot of noise as well. So you can see that Lee in the living room hears this going on, and what it seems like in the space of like 30 seconds somehow manages to get out of the house with Claire through the front window. You know, and this is where, you know, plausibility is stretched to the max here. You know, how likely is it that two people could get out of a window and disappear down quite a long street without anyone noticing, when it apparently happens in such a short period of time. I'll get back onto that in a minute. So whilst this argument is happening as well, Beth's waters break. I actually thought that near the end of this series was going to be her giving birth, but it's happening a lot quicker than I thought it would be. So we've got Beth going into labour, we have got Lee doing a runner with Claire, and both Alec and Ellie are now just like completely screwed, basically. So the next episode will presumably go back into the trial again. I don't know what's going to happen now, given that Beth is obviously not going to be able to take the stand again, and I assume that she will need to be questioned by the prosecution side. So I don't know what's going to happen there. And we should see Ellie take the stand soon as well. And on the Sandbrook side of things, obviously, you know, things have completely changed there. It's now going to all be about trying to find Lee and Claire. So if we go back to the questions I had in the first episode, we've got some answers to some of them, and there's a couple of new questions that I have as well. So the first question I have, I've already mentioned. It's about the "is Alec sick" question. And yes, we know he is, because of the heart condition that we already know about from the first series. So yeah, I guess, you know, that's probably going to progress a bit further. We might have another couple of hospital visits for him in this series like we did in the last one. So the second question I had last time was about whether or not Claire knows more than she's letting on. And I think that is obviously still quite a big question. With her disappearing with Lee now, there is the question, well, did she do that willingly? Because surely if she left not of her own accord, you would have heard her screaming or shouting or something, or there at least would have been noise of a disturbance, you know, like her kicking or whatever. So the fact that they managed to slip away quite easily would suggest to me that she left with him willingly. And if that is the case, then I think definitely suggests that she is involved in some other way, and that it's not just a case of her being, you know, a completely innocent person who is scared of her ex-husband. The other question I had last time was about Sharon and Jocelyn, the two lawyers, about their relationship, and obviously there's something that's happened in the past there. There's kind of, again, more hints at Sharon's history in this episode. We see her have a really quite emotional phone call with someone, and she talks about how the past can't be changed, and the way that she signs off the call would suggest that it's maybe like a family member or a partner or an ex-partner or a daughter or a son. And I don't know if that's linked with the stuff with Jocelyn in the past, but there's definitely obviously more of a storyline to her that we're going to find out more about later in the series. I don't think I have any like new questions this time. I mean, there's obviously things I want to know what's going to happen with them, like, you know, are people going to find out about Mark and Tom meeting up? What's the other secrets that are going to be revealed in this series? There was quite a funny moment actually where Jocelyn meets up with all the witnesses before the trial and is, you know, telling them that what to expect the next day, and Beth makes some comment about like, oh well, none of us here have anything to hide, and then you can see the camera pan round and like everyone's sort of looking quite shifty, so it's kind of another hint that yeah, obviously they all do have something to hide, and that we're probably going to find out what that is at some point in this series. My predictions are also quite similar to the last one, so with Sandbrook, I predict still that Lee is not the killer of those girls, and I still don't think that the older one is dead. And again, you know, my suspicions with Claire are kind of getting worse with every episode. And on the Joe Miller side, I still maintain that I don't think we're going to find out that someone else killed Danny. I think it's just going to be, you know, these secrets that will be revealed. I think once we get further in the series, I'll maybe give more predictions about what those secrets are. At the moment, I really don't know what they are. Thanks to people who left comments and things on the last video, and there's a few people left their predictions as well. One of them being that they thought that it was Tom that killed Danny, and that Dad's been covering for him, and that is something that I thought in the first series, but I'm not too sure if that is the case now. I think maybe if it was, it would have been revealed in the first series, so I'm not sure. And I know actually that the remake of Broadchurch in America, that's the route that they took, that it was the son that killed the friend, and that the dad covered up for him. So that kind of makes me think even more that that's not going to happen, because I think I don't know if the UK version is likely to end up using the same twist that the American one did, considering that's already been on. So that's something I'm not too sure of. Also, I spoke to someone at work recently about this episode, and he thought that maybe Alec was in on the whole Lee and Claire escaping thing, and that he'd planned for you know, her to run off with him. I'm not sure I agree with that one, but let me know if you also think that that's maybe what was going on. Okay, so that's my thoughts on episode 2. Sorry that this video is so late, I've just really not had any time to film it. This really is like the absolute last moment I could possibly do it, which is why I'm doing it in really crap lighting on a Sunday afternoon. I will try and do episode 3s a little bit quicker in the week.